Good afternoon. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. The Center for Turkish Studies at Kadir Has University has published the results of its annual survey on social and political trends in Turkey. And joining us today to talk about the findings of this survey is Osman Zaim, who is a professor of economics at Kadir Has University. Good afternoon, Professor Zaim. Welcome to This Week in Turkey.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
So for starters, can you give us some brief information about the scope and methodology of this survey? You could talk about things like where it was conducted, between which dates, what the sample size was, etc.
Okay. Let's start with the objective. The objective of this survey, Societal and Political Trends in Turkey, that is conducted since year 2010 on an annual basis, is to measure Turkish society's perceptions on last year's social and political issues. The methodology is a quantitative survey, that is face-to-face interviews with 1,000 individuals, all 18 years old and above, so those are adult individuals. Sample is representative of Turkish population at not school level and is selected from 26 provinces. So therefore it's a provincial survey conducted at the city centers. It is not representative of the rural areas, but given that a large majority of the Turkish population resides in urban areas, it's quite representative still. So the survey is conducted between December 12, 2018 and January 4, 2019, and we released it on January 30th, 2019, by a press conference which is recently held.
And the first heading of your survey is the most important current problem in Turkey. This is what the respondents were asked to begin this survey with. And how did they answer this question?
So the answers to these questions are as follows. The most current important problem in Turkey seems to be this year is unemployment. It increased from 17% to 27%. So last year the respondents were, 17% of the respondents only were telling that it is unemployment, but this year it increased to a level like 27%. And then high cost of living is the second highest important problem. The third one is fight against populist terrorist organization, and the remaining ones are like weakening Turkish lira, serious asylums, limitations of rights and freedoms. So the only difference, the surprising difference of this year's survey from the last year's survey is that the importance that the respondents are attaching to economic issues. So in last year, 32% of the respondents attached the economic issues as the first criteria, like unemployment, high cost of living, and all that. But this year, 51% of the respondents ranked economic issues as the first important problem of Turkey, not economic issues. So economic issues seems to be the critical element here, which kind of determines all the questions, all the upcoming questions.
Mm-hmm. So, what we gather from your response is that the findings suggest that there is a deep sense of discontent among the public about the rising cost of living and the difficulty of finding jobs. And how does this manifest itself in the public's attitude towards government policies as a whole?
If I were to tell you the last word first, one word that summarizes the entire survey is actually discontent. So maybe you want to hear why and where this discontent and frustration comes from. Maybe we are not allowed to spell it loudly, but we may in a politically correct way, say that economic hardships that are faced last year, which are kind of generated by financial and economic attacks from abroad, right? So one may still claim that economic crisis is unfolding, but the next question is really, nature does not collaborate us with well as either. Floods hitting the agricultural products, natural disasters we are facing, and all that. Who is frustrated the most? That's the next question among all these people who are responding to our affairs. That's a crucial question, actually. And we detect like 10% of the constituents of, that is, followers or supporters of the ruling party, loyal to them up until last elections, seems to be detaching from that party. And it is this 10% of former AKP voters, the current incumbent party, seems like will be determining the fate of the next upcoming elections. Not the undecided ones who people used to think will determine. So, and what was your question again?
My question was, how did the public view the government's policies? What was their attitude towards the government's policies? Because in the previous question I asked you about what their worries were, how they answered the question of what the most important problem in Turkey was. And the answer was unemployment and the rising cost of living. So my question to you was whether this manifested itself in the responses that people gave to your questions about how they view the government's current policies.
Okay, so one of the questions were on evaluation of government's economic policies. The question was something like, how would we evaluate economic policies of the government, whether extremely successful, neither successful nor unsuccessful, and determinedly unsuccessful. So now, let's compare year 2017 to 2018, the last survey. So last year, people who were finding economic policies as successful was 48% almost of the respondents. But this year, that goes down to 33.5%. So from 47% to 33%. So last year, only 27% of the population was finding economic policies of the government unsuccessful. This year, 42% of them kind of find economic policies quite unsuccessful. So we actually, you know what we also did? We also made a breakdown with respect to party supporters. For example, 62% of the AK Party supporters find governmental policies still successful in economic policies, whereas those who find successful are like 16.5%. Now, let's come to evaluation of the government's foreign policy. What do they say about that? So in 2018, people who find government's foreign policy as being successful is 32%, and who finds unsuccessful are like 37%. But last year, the same ratios were 45% and 24% respectively. So therefore, 45% of the people were finding governmental foreign policies successful last year. It suddenly drops to 32%, and those who find unsuccessful were 24% last year. Now they find like 37% unsuccessful. So discontent from government policies are continuously on the rise. Whether it is economic, whether it is foreign policy, whether it is Syrian policy, so there is a discontent for almost all policies of the government. Another example is Syrian policy, government's policies with respect to Syria issues.
Is this the government's policy towards Syria, the country, or Syrian refugees in Turkey?
There's a problem with the voice again. I did not get it. It's interrupted.
Oh, my question was the point that you just mentioned. Is this, are you going to be talking about how the respondents viewed the government's Syria policy as in the country, or the issue of Syrian refugees in Turkey?
No, it's just the government's policies in Syria, not the refugees per se. So, for example, people who are supporting Syrian policy is 34.7%, whereas those who find Syrian policies as successful last year were 38%. Again, there is a drop from 38.5 to 34. Let's look at the unsuccessful part. Those who find Syrian policies as being unsuccessful were like 28%, now they are like 35%. Okay. There is an increase in discontent, and there is an increase in people who find all those policies are as being unsuccessful. Kurdish policy is another policy just alike. So people who find Kurdish issues, policy with regards to Kurdish issues as being successful was like 43.5% last year. This rate goes down to 35%. Again, an increase in discontent. People who find it unsuccessful were 25%. It increases suddenly to 30% this year.
You mentioned foreign policy, Professor Zaim. Let's carry on from there. And what can you tell us about how your respondents answered questions that attempted to measure their perceptions of other countries, such as the US, Russia, or multilateral organizations like NATO, the EU?
All right. So we have some questions on which countries that we should be collaborating in foreign issues. Okay. So majority of the respondents tell that if we were to collaborate on foreign issues with another country, it should be a Muslim country. So then it comes, the second choice is like Russia. The third choice is like, let's be a lonely wolf and let's not collaborate with somebody else. So this is kind of separate question, but we can rank the countries which are threat to Turkey. How public sees the threat? Where does the threat come from? On top of the list comes USA. So 82% of the respondents finds US being the threat to Turkey. And then comes Israel, for example, 64% of the respondents find Israel as being a danger for Turkey. Then comes Armenia, then comes Syria, so on and so forth. I can rank those up till Iraq, for example. How about Russian Federation? That's the least one almost. So only 39% of the individuals find Russia as being a threat. In And Turkish population does not consider that there will be a threat from China, for example.
Please go on.
With respect to Turkey's friends, they find Azerbaijan being the closest ally to Turkey. Then comes the northern Cyprus, of course. Then Pakistan, Georgia, Russian Federation, and so on and so forth.
And finally, Professor Zaim, let's move on from foreign policy and the perception of other countries by the public, and let's get to what has become perhaps a buzzword in Turkey in the past 2 or 3 years, which is polarization. What do your findings suggest about social and political polarization in Turkey?
Polarizations, yeah. We have been asking this question to the public since 2010 almost, and increasingly people tend to think that polarization is disappearing. For example, in general, this was like in 2016, 61.7% of the public was thinking that there is a political polarization in Turkey. Okay, let me tell you the 2017 figure, 52% seller. This year it was like 38%. It went down from 61% in 2016 down to 30% in 2018. Those are the people who think that there exists a political polarization. So we have a breakdown, for example, with respect to political parties, loyalty to political parties. Supporters of CHP party, for example, think that they were thinking that in 2016, 80% of their voters were thinking that there is a polarization. In 2018, it's like 46%. So that this is valid for all the parties, for all the parties' constituency, that there was a polarization, but that is decreasing over the years.
Thank you very much, Professor Zaim, for being with us today and for sharing the findings of your survey.
You are very welcome. It was a pleasure.
Today, we were joined by Professor Osman Zaim, who shared the findings of Kadir Has University's 2018 survey on social and political trends in Turkey. And now we'll continue with our next news video. President and Justice and Development Party AKP Chairman Recep Tayyip Erdoğan announced his party's manifesto ahead of the upcoming local elections on March 31st.
The election manifesto, titled Work for the People, Work from the Heart, was unveiled at the Ankara Sports Hall yesterday. The manifesto is based on 11 categories, which are city plans, infrastructure and transportation, urban transformation, unique cities, smart cities, eco-friendly cities, social municipality, horizontal urbanization, joint administration with the public, austerity and transparency, and value-generating cities. Speaking to thousands of supporters, President Erdoğan said the AKP will tackle unplanned urbanization with short, medium, and long-term strategies. We will have the simplicity of Seljuk architecture, the elegance of Ottoman architecture, and today's modern lines will prevail, Erdoğan said. We will produce development models that are unique to the geography, climate, history, and the urban tissue of the cities, Erdoğan added. Moreover, the president announced that his party will set up a mechanism to monitor and measure the performance of mayoral candidates. The election manifesto vows that AKP-run municipalities will serve under the manifesto's articles focusing on city plans, infrastructure and transportation, urban transformation, environment-friendly cities, social municipalities, horizontal urbanization, people management, austerity and transparency, and value-generating cities. The Unique Cities article of the manifesto promises cities will be developed in accordance with their stories. In line with this, projects that disrupt the silhouette of cities, have no aesthetic views, and do not contribute to the city's cultural essence will not be allowed. Technology will be used to serve the people and cities as part of smart cities implementations, according to the manifesto. Apart from being technologically advanced, cities will also be environmentally conscious and eco-friendly, while horizontal urbanization models will be embraced across the country.
The People's Democratic Party, HDP, has announced that it will not name any mayoral candidates in Istanbul, Izmir, and the southern metropolis of Adana in the March 31st local elections.
HDP spokesperson Saruhan Oluç told journalists in Ankara on Monday that efforts on nominating candidates in other big cities continued. "We have decided on sacrifices in some places in the name of democracy, democratic rights, and freedoms in Turkey," Oluç said. "We are not doing this on behalf of this or that party. We are doing this for the struggle for democracy," he added, while commenting on the election strategies of the party. On the other hand, main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, has determined mayoral candidates for the provinces and districts of Istanbul and Izmir, following night-long negotiations at a party assembly meeting until the early hours of Monday. Tunç Soyer, incumbent mayor of the Aegean province Izmir's Seferihisar district, was announced as CHP's mayoral candidate for Izmir. Some 145 mayoral candidates were also determined at the party assembly.
Turkey's foreign trade gap in 2018 narrowed 28.4% year-on-year, Turkish Statistical Institute announced yesterday.
The figure reached $55 billion last year, down from a $76.8 billion deficit in 2017, according to the Statistical Institute. Turkish exports rose 7% on a yearly basis to hit $168 billion, as imports dropped to $223 billion, indicating a decrease of 4.6%. The exports to imports coverage ratio, meanwhile, advanced to 75.3% last year, up from 67.1% in 2017. Turkey's exports to the European Union, its main trading partner with a share of 50%, surged 13.7% year-on-year to total at $84 billion last year. Germany was the top export market of Turkey, with some $16.1 billion worth of exports. It was followed by the UK with $11.1 billion, Italy with nearly $9.6 million, and Iraq with $8.4 billion in 2018. The top country for Turkey's imports was Russia, with almost $23 billion last year. China followed it with $20.7 billion, Germany with $20.4 billion, and the US with $12.4 billion. Meanwhile, Turkish Central Bank lowered its 2019 inflation rate forecast by 0.6 percentage points to 14.6%. Central Bank Governor Murat Çetinkaya said the rate will fluctuate between 11.9% and 17.3% through the end of 2019, with a 70% probability.
Transparency International has published its 2018 Corruption Perceptions Index, in which Turkey ranked 78th out of 180 countries.
A collective global failure to control corruption is contributing to a crisis of democracy across the world. So is the verdict of the latest Corruption Perceptions Index, published on Tuesday by Transparency International. Turkey ranks 78th out of the 180 countries in the index. Scoring 41 on a scale of 100, Turkey was put in the category of countries to watch. The annual report grades countries on a scale from 0 to 100, with 0 denoting a highly corrupt country and 100 meaning that country is very clean. The report also pointed out that Turkey was among 5 countries that showed the sharpest decline in the index over the last 5 years, along with Hungary, Syria, Bahrain, and St. Lucia. The analysis, with regard to Turkey, established a direct correlation between perceived corruption and the issues of rule of law, freedom of the press, the strength of civil society, and freedom of assembly, as well as freedom of speech, and argued that the violations occurring in these areas prevent the country from rising above the global average. Lack of separation of powers, lack of judicial independence, non-observance of the merit system, tender and privatization processes that go against the laws on public procurement in disregard of the public interest, and the constant weakening of essential democratic institutions were also cited in the analysis as outstanding problems that led Turkey to be categorized with countries lacking democratic traditions. The CPI report also observed an overall increase in global corruption, with 2/3 of the countries scoring below 50 on the scale of 100. Scandinavian countries dominated the top of the list, with Denmark ranking first, followed by New Zealand, Sweden, Switzerland, and Finland. The countries perceived as having the highest levels of corruption are Somalia, South Sudan, and Syria. In Turkey, increased levels of corruption have also gone hand in hand with a decline in political and civil rights, as well as attempts to weaken accountability institutions. Turkey's CPI score dropped sharply from 50 to 41 in the period since 2013. In that same period, Turkey's Freedom in the World score declined by almost half, from a score of 61 to 32. This year, Turkey's Freedom House rating fell from partly free to not free.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 5 p.m. Goodbye.